They thought you were blind. They believed shadows could protect their whispers, that secrecy would keep their intentions safe. Behind your back, they plotted, each voice echoing with arrogance, each word dripping with envy. They thought unity would make them strong. They built a circle of false loyalty around your name, twisting stories, fabricating lies, hoping that numbers would overwhelm truth. But they forgot one fatal truth. Circles built on betrayal collapse when confronted with reality. When you finally replied, you didn't shout. You didn't grovel for understanding. You let your reply land with precision, cutting straight through their fragile alliance. One sentence from you carried more weight than their entire plot, because truth spoken calmly destroys louder lies. That moment shattered them, not because you tried to break them, but because your strength revealed how weak their circle always was. They underestimated silence. They thought you didn't notice. They mistook your composure for ignorance. In their arrogance, they forgot that awareness does not need to announce itself. You had been watching. You had been collecting every signal, every shift in behavior, every contradiction in their speech. They assumed you were still the same person who trusted blindly, who believed too quickly, who gave loyalty without question. But you had changed. You walked with awareness now, and that awareness meant their plotting was nothing more than a performance you let run its course. When you replied, it wasn't emotion, it was clarity. That clarity crushed them because it made every one of their efforts look childish. Your awareness turned their betrayal into comedy, and comedy is the cruelest exposure. Circles built on gossip thrive in absence. They feed on your silence, on your distance, on your unawareness. But when you stepped into the room and answered without fear, their energy broke. They wanted you to react with anger, to scream, to fight, to match their chaos. But you didn't. You replied with poise, with words sharpened by truth and calm. That is what destroyed them. They weren't prepared for your restraint. Restraint is lethal to schemers because it leaves them defenseless. They are used to controlling the narrative. They are used to painting you as unstable. Your controlled reply ripped that image apart, and their circle dissolved under the weight of their own hypocrisy. In relationships, betrayal never begins loudly. It begins quietly, with small conversations, with subtle tests, with loyalty split in half. They thought those moments would never reach you, but your growth gave you new eyes. You saw patterns that once slipped past. You recognized when actions didn't match words. You knew when the temperature of the room shifted. Their circle thought secrecy was strength, but you understood that betrayal always exposes itself eventually. And when it did, your reply wasn't vengeance. It was finality, a clean dismissal, a removal of energy. They expected fire, you gave them ice. And ice is deadlier than flame because it preserves the memory of your reply forever in their minds. In life, snakes always gather in groups. Alone, they are harmless. Together, they believe they are unstoppable. But unity built on malice is brittle. It looks strong, but it fractures under pressure. They gathered against you. But the moment you replied, their unity cracked. Some turned quiet. Some turned defensive. Some turned on each other. That is the fate of circles built on betrayal. They cannot endure exposure. Your reply shattered them because it forced them to face themselves. And facing yourself after treachery is a punishment no one escapes. You didn't need to break them. They broke themselves trying to explain why you still stood unshaken while their circle crumbled. Psychology explains that groups bond over shared enemies when they lack individual strength. They bonded over you because they had nothing else. You were their unifying thread. Without you, they had no identity. And when you replied with strength, you removed that thread. You gave them no more material to hold on to, no more illusions to feed their bond. That is why they collapsed. They weren't united by vision. They were united by envy. And envy cannot survive when the person it targeted proves untouchable. Your reply didn't just shatter their circle. It erased the glue that held them together. You didn't waste energy proving yourself. That was the deadliest part. While they built schemes, you built strength. While they whispered, you worked. And when you finally replied, it wasn't with excuses. It was with results. That is the reply no critic knows how to answer. They wanted a debate. You gave them a reality they could not argue against. Your resilience, your progress, your unshaken presence, these were your weapons. And nothing destroys a circle of plotters faster than undeniable evidence that their effort was meaningless. They didn't just lose the fight, they lost their purpose. They are still reeling from that moment, still wondering how everything unraveled so quickly. But the truth is, their collapse was always inevitable. They mistook your patience for weakness. They thought you would never notice, never reply, never rise. And when you did, it wasn't theatrical. It was surgical. You cut clean, and the wound left them speechless. That is the lasting sting of betrayal confronted with composure. They cannot recover because your reply didn't just defeat them. It exposed them. Exposure is worse than loss because it makes others see the truth too. Their circle shattered in private, but their shame echoes in public. Every plotter expects the same outcome. They expect their schemes to corner you. They expect their lies to define you. They expect your collapse to validate them. What they never prepare for is your reply carrying more weight than their entire plot. That is why they fear you now. Because you showed that no matter how many gather, one voice rooted in truth, discipline, and strength is enough to silence the entire circle. They saw themselves as predators. But in the end, they were prey to your patience. They feared your power, but what broke them was your composure. They built a circle of false loyalty around your name, and at first, it looked convincing. Smiles lined their faces, words poured out with warmth, and gestures made you believe you were surrounded by allies. But false loyalty has cracks, and you learn to see them. Their praise always felt a little too rehearsed. Their support only appeared when eyes were watching. Their promises sounded heavy, but carried no weight. They weren't standing beside you out of respect. They were standing beside you to monitor you, to study your steps, to feel important through proximity. That is the tragedy of false loyalty. It pretends to hold you up while secretly waiting for you to fall. They thought they built a fortress of protection around you, but in truth, it was a cage designed to control. And once you noticed, their entire performance lost its power. The circle was never built to celebrate you. It was built to contain you. They wanted to keep you close enough to influence, but not free enough to rise beyond their reach. They feared your independence more than your failure. That is why they wrapped you in loyalty that looked real but wasn't. They cheered when it was easy, vanished when it was difficult, and reappeared when you stood tall again, so they could say they had been there all along. That cycle was their script, but you broke it. You started seeing who stayed quiet when you needed them most. You noticed who changed the subject when your name carried weight. And one by one, their masks slipped. Their circle was never a circle of loyalty. It was a circle of watchers waiting for a chance to strike. Their loyalty was transactional. They gave when it benefited them, withheld when it didn't. Every compliment was currency, every favor an investment in future control. You were not surrounded by friends. You were surrounded by accountants calculating how much your success could pay them back. That's the difference between real and false loyalty. Real loyalty invests without demand. False loyalty tallies every action, waiting to collect when the time is right. But what unsettled them was your refusal to play the debtor. You didn't owe them what they thought you did. You walked away with gratitude for what was real and indifference for what was fake. And that indifference shattered their illusion more than confrontation ever could. In relationships, false loyalty comes wrapped in devotion. They say the right words. They hold you close, they promise forever. But forever is conditional to them. It lasts only as long as it is convenient. Their loyalty shifts with circumstances, with temptations, with opportunities that suit them better. And when the shift comes, you feel the coldness of betrayal dressed as inevitability. But you learn the lesson. You stopped confusing consistency in words with consistency in actions. You stopped believing time alone proves loyalty. Time only reveals it. And when it revealed the circle of false loyalty around your name, you chose not to beg. You let the circle collapse on its own weight. In friendships, their loyalty wasn't protection. It was surveillance. They stayed close so they could see you clearly, not to shield you but to report on you. They took your struggles and turned them into stories, passed your secrets like currency, and pretended it was care. But surveillance never feels like love once you realize it. You noticed their questions were sharper than their answers, their ears more open than their hands. They wanted your trust without ever giving you theirs. That imbalance is the fingerprint of false loyalty. And once you recognized it, their closeness stopped feeling comforting and started feeling like chains. You cut them quietly, and freedom replaced the weight of pretending you didn't see. The psychology of false loyalty is built on fear. They feared losing access to you, so they clung to you with smiles. They feared being replaced, so they offered shallow support. They feared being irrelevant, so they exaggerated their devotion. Their loyalty was not about you. It was about their own insecurity. And insecurity never holds steady. It cracks under pressure. That is why their circle shattered when you no longer needed their validation. Their fear of being left behind became reality the moment you stood strong on your own. Their loyalty ended where your independence began. They thought the circle would control the narrative. They wanted to define who you were, not based on truth, but on what benefited them. They called themselves protectors, but they were gatekeepers. They cheered when you aligned with their plans, but grew restless when you chose your own path. Their circle was not a shield. It was a prison disguised as friendship. And you broke out not by fighting, but by outgrowing. Outgrowth is the greatest betrayal to false loyalty, because it proves they were never holding you up. They were holding you down. When you finally replied, when you finally moved beyond their grasp, the circle fractured instantly. Some tried to defend their name. Others tried to rewrite the past. But no rewriting could hide the truth. They were never for you. They were for what you gave them. And when you stopped giving, they stopped standing. That collapse didn't break you. It freed you. Because circles built on false loyalty don't protect, they suffocate. Their destruction is not your loss, it is your rebirth. False loyalty is always louder in the beginning. They shout their devotion, exaggerate their closeness, and demand visibility for their support. Real loyalty is quiet. It doesn't need applause, doesn't need recognition, doesn't need to constantly remind you of its presence. You learned that lesson through fire. You learned that not everyone around you is truly with you. And instead of being bitter, you became sharper. You built a life where loyalty is measured in action, not in words. Their false circle fell apart, but the few who stayed silent and steady became diamonds in the rubble. They underestimated you because you never shouted about what you knew. They mistook quiet for empty and calm for clueless. You watched, listened, collected small details no one else noticed. A slight pause in a sentence. A missing date in a story. A habit that contradicted a claim. You did not guess. You verified. You did not need to parade your intelligence. You let outcomes witness for you. They kept asking how you knew, as if knowledge falls from the sky. You knew because you cared enough to pay attention. You treated curiosity like a craft, not a mood. You kept notes. You kept receipts. You allowed time to reveal what rushing hides. That is why your IQ feels scary to them. Your awareness turns their theater into daylight. Your accuracy removes their wiggle room. And when you move, you do not need permission.